Good morning. We only have 2 weeks of school left, I think. So, for these last 2 weeks, we are going to be focusing on poetry. I don't do a ton of poetry because a lot of times I personally don't really love it, but some poems are amazing. And there are a lot of like really important things that you need to know to be successful as you go forward. So the last couple weeks here, we're just going to be focusing on some of like the structure of poetry and specific things that you need to know going along with that. So if you have a piece of paper, any sort of piece of paper, that would be fantastic because that way you can take notes with me. And here we go. Okay, so poetry. So first off, poems are a type of writing that have a different structure than what we call prose. So like fiction, nonfiction, those types of things, especially fiction, we call that prose because you're just like writing. But poetry has that different structure. So we have our lines and we have our stanzas. So in poetry, lines are the rows of words. Okay. So just any line that goes across. It doesn't mean that it's a complete sentence. Punctuation gets kind of funky with poetry. So your rows of words are your lines. Your stanzas are groups of lines. You can also think of it as like the paragraph of a poem. Sorry, I made that weird. Okay. So, another big thing about poetry is that it does include figurative language. And so we talked about figurative language, whether or not you remember, that's on you. So, we're going to list a couple that they use very often. So, personification, and if you forgot what that was, that is when they give human characteristics to something not human. Okay? So, like the wind whistled through the trees. The wind can't actually whistle because it's not a human thing to do that, but we can give it that trait. Next, we have metaphors. So that's when you compare something without using like or as. They use this a lot in poetry. Okay, so saying that something basically is something else, you're comparing those two things. Imagery, when you're painting a picture using words that appeal to the five senses. So when they're describing how something looks, smells, feels, tastes, sounds. Alliteration, that's that repetition of a sound in a sentence. So Mary must make muffins for Monday. That would be an alliteration. Hyperbole are those huge exaggerations. I'm so hungry I could eat 17 cows. Obviously not the case. And our last one, we're just going to put this on here because it's really, really important and I want to make sure I spell it right. Repetition. So repetition is literally just repeating something. But a lot of times in poems, they will repeat a word or a phrase over and over again to kind of try to get you to grasp that meaning. So with poetry, word choice is really, really important because every word has a specific meaning and was chosen for a specific reason. So it's really, really important to pay attention, especially to those things that repeat, because that helps you to get the meaning, right? Like with fiction, a lot of times you just read it and you can understand what they're saying. With poetry, sometimes you have to think a little deeper because they're using these different figurative techniques. The final thing that we're going to talk about with poetry today is what we call rhyme scheme. This has been on benchmarks and NWEA testing, and I know many of you have been like, I don't know what this means. What does that mean? And I've tried to explain it like real briefly when we've done it, but we're going to get like a legit definition. So a rhyme scheme is the pattern of rhyme in a poem. Okay. So, and you're focusing mostly on the end rhyme. So the last word. And so you're seeing what final words rhyme and you give them a letter that shows you how they are like connected. So it would be like, oh, these two lines end in one word. So it's going to be A, B, B. So it goes with the alphabet. So we're going to do one quickly together. So I have this little kind of dumb poem here. Let me move this out of the way so you can see. Okay. A mouse in her room woke Miss Dowd, who was frightened and screamed very loud. And a happy thought hit her to scare off the critter. She just sat up in bed and meowed. So we're going to look through. So starting with our first line, a mouse in her room woke Miss Dowd. So that's our first rhyming line. So our first rhyme is going to be the oud, and so we are going to put an A. So we mark it with the A. Now we go to the next one. Who was frightened and screamed very loud. That has the same rhyme, so we keep the same letter. Then a happy thought hit her. That does not rhyme with loud, so we're going to give that a new letter. So that'll be B. We're just literally going in the order of the alphabet. To scare off the critter, B, because that rhymes with hitter, critter. She just sat up in bed and meowed. So meowed rhymes with loud and dowd, so we are putting an A there, okay? So you assign A to that first line's rhyme. And then any other line that would end with "oud," if this poem went longer, it would have an A. And then you move on to B for the next one, and C and D. So that's how you do rhyme scheme. Not every poem rhymes. Not every poem is written in a very specific structure. Poetry lets authors be very, very free with what they do. But for the poems that do rhyme, that do have that rhyme scheme, this is how you figure it out. So we'll do one other thing together, and I'll show you just how to answer a couple of questions and talk about a couple other things. Okay, so the sea wind. I am a pool in a peaceful place. I greet the great sky face to face. I know the stars and the stately moon, and the wind that runs with rippling shoon. But why does it always bring to me the far-off beautiful sound of the sea? The marsh grass weaves me a wall of green, but the wind comes whispering in between. In the dead of the night when the sky is deep, the wind comes waking me out of sleep. Why does it always bring to me the far-off terrible call of the sea? So the subject of our poem, the subject is what they're talking about or who they're talking to. In this one, we don't know who they're talking to, so our subject of the poem is the sea and the speaker. So when you're talking about a poem, you don't say the author, you say the speaker, because we don't know who is speaking. So there's the speaker and the subject. Speaker is who is talking, and the subject is what they're talking about or who they're talking to. Okay? So the speaker is talking about how the sea, wind, oh my gosh, I can't type today, affects him or her. Okay? Our rhyme scheme of the poem. So what I'm going to do is show you on here. So place and face have the same rhyme. Okay. Then we go moon. So moon does not rhyme with face. So we put a B. Shoon gets a B because that rhymes with moon. Me and C. So those two rhyme. Right? I always keep pointing and you can't see. All right, and then we get to green. That doesn't rhyme with anything we've had so far, so we do a D. And then in between, but that rhymes with green. Whoops. Deep doesn't rhyme with anything we've had. Sleep doesn't rhyme with anything we've had. But then we come back to me and C. So we go back to that C, okay? Because those are still the same rhyme as that. So you keep that together. Okay, so our rhyme scheme then is described as being A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, E, C, C. Okay, and we're going to say it has pairs of rhyming lines. Okay, so the author uses several examples of personification in the second stanza. Identify one of these examples and explain what the author means. So first off, what is a stanza? Well, that's like the paragraph. So here, right there, is our first stanza, and here is our second stanza. So now we want to say, okay, where do I have some personification? Marsh grass weaves me a wall of green. That's one. But the wind comes whispering in between. Let's focus on that one. So the wind comes whispering. We know that the wind can't actually do that. So I'm going to say the speaker says that the wind is whispering. Okay, so that is our example. So when it says identify one of these examples, that's when you just say what it is. But when it says explain what the author means, you have to go deeper. We struggled a lot with this when we learned figurative language earlier this year. You have to think like, why did they say, what are they really trying to say? So when she says the wind comes whispering in between, she is saying, or we're going to say they are saying that the wind is very soft, right? Because a whisper is very soft and gentle as it blows through the grass, okay? And then, how does the speaker feel about the sea? So this is where we have to kind of think more about meaning. And this is the part of poetry that people either love or hate, right? Poetry can be very divisive, like dividing people. You either love all of the different things that you have to think about and all of the different ways to construct meaning, or you hate it because you want it to be straightforward, okay? I found that it's a very one-sided one or the other thing. So how do they feel about this sea? So at the beginning, they talk about being peaceful and greeting the sky and seeing the moon and this is lovely and the sea is beautiful. But then it gets to this like negative, dark, terrible thing. So we're going to say the speaker has mixed feelings about the sea, and then we're going to describe the mood. So the mood, the first stanza is very peaceful and calm. However, mood, second stanza is dreary, dark, and almost frightening, right? Because she's talking about the terrible call of the sea, which makes you think like, oh my gosh, is she gonna go like run into the sea or something? So we have those two different things. So we don't totally, she has like a mixed feeling about it. She's peaceful, she greets the sky, she sees the beautiful stuff, and then she's like, ah, the beautiful sea. But once she like gets there, she's kind of creeped out and it's like waking her, and she's got this terrible feeling towards this sea. Okay? So if you need to relook at any of those notes, there was a short paper. Go back, just rewind through the video. Go ahead and do the exit slip. Again, I didn't put in an independent practice because the exit slip will make it easier for those of you who are working on phones to be able to keep up and get everything done. Make sure you are still trying your best. If you need to retake the quiz from last week because you didn't do well on it, send me an email and I will remove your score so that you can redo it. Okay? All right. Bye.